We were in the second lesson of part 7, the final part of William Walker Atkinson's The Arcane Teaching. Lesson 20. Lesson 20 is the secret of rhythm. The secret of rhythm. Let us now consider the law of rhythm, the mastery of which constitutes one of the arcane secrets. Listen to the aphorism. Aphorism 22. In the cosmos, everything moves. Everything is in constant motion. Everything is undergoing constant change. Everything, so to speak, beats time. Vibration is universal and manifesting according to the law of rhythm. Constitutes the difference of degree existing between things on all planes. Everything moves to and fro in rhythm between its two poles. Everything rises and falls in rhythm within the limits of its nature. Everything advances and retreats in the law of rhythm within the limits of its power. Now, the aphorism informs us of the truth that in the cosmos everything moves, is in constant motion, is undergoing constant change. This is one of the fundamental principles of the ancient instruction of the arcane teachers, which has been steadfastly adhered to throughout the centuries, until now the most advanced modern science has moved to the same position. Heraclitus, the famous Greek philosopher who lived nearly 2,500 years ago and who was affiliated with the Arcane school, made this principle the basis of his philosophy. His basic principle was everything moves, everything changes, everything is in flux, everything is constantly becoming. The English scientific writer Claude says, nothing escapes the law of change. The shrewd speculations of Heraclitus, the Ionian, who lived 2,500 years ago, that everything is in a state of flux and therefore that the universe is always becoming, have added confirmation in every discovery of modern physics. Buddha, 600 BC, said, everything changes but change. Huxley said, the more we learn of the nature of things, the more evident it is that what we call rest is only unperceived activity. That seeming peace is silent but strenuous battle. In every part, at every moment, the state of the cosmos is the expression of a transitory adjustment of contending forces. A scene of strife in which all the combatants fall in turn. What is true of each part is true of the whole. Natural knowledge tends more and more to the conclusion that all the choir of heaven and furniture of the earth are transitory forms or parcels of cosmic substances wending along the road of evolution. From nebulous potentiality, through endless growths of suns and planet and satellite, through all varieties of matter, through infinite diversities of life and thought, possibly, through modes of being of which we have neither a conception nor a competent form, or are competent to form any, back to the indefinable latency from which they arose. Thus, the most obvious attribute of the cosmos is its impermanence. End of quote. The universal and ceaseless motion of all things is caused, of course, by the operation of the principle of motion, one of the three cosmic principles, which acts upon substance in the many manifestations arising principally from the action and reaction of the dual principles of, or rather the opposite poles of, attraction-repulsion. Its forms and varieties are as manifold as are those of substance or consciousness, that is to say, they are practically infinite. The basic activity of motion, however, is that which we call vibration, of which the aphorism says, vibration is universal and manifesting according to the law of rhythm, constitutes the difference of degrees between things on all planes. Modern science now stands on all fours with the arcane teaching in this respect, and not only holds that all things are in constant vibration, but also that the rates of vibration determine the difference in the elemental nature of all things. Everything from the tiny corpuscle or electron of which the atoms are composed to the greatest masses of matter known to us manifest the law of rhythmic vibration. Moreover, science has demonstrated that the sole difference between the elements, so to speak, the so-called elements which make up the different forms of physical matter, arises from the rate and degree of vibration manifested by the electrons composing them. That is to say, they are but varying degrees of vibration. The difference between gold and lead consists but of differences in vibration. The difference between light and beeswax is but a difference in vibration. In previous lessons, you have seen that the cosmos, when resolved into the infinity of nothingness, is practically motionless. The principle of motion is in a condition of absolute rest, and yet that absolute rest is analogous to motion of such a high degree of vibration as to be practically motionless and at rest. In this condition or state, the two poles of motion have been resolved into one. The extremes have merged. Absolute motion and absolute rest are seen to be identical. But from the first dawn of the new cosmic day, there is manifested vibration on a constantly descending scale until the lowest point is reached. Then the upward trend begins. And in these varying degrees of vibration is manifested everything that is in the cosmos. Not only the physical things, but also the mental states. Every mental state of any and all kinds has its own degree of vibration, which makes it what it is and constitutes its difference from other mental states. And these mental vibrations may be transmitted from one brain to another in the phenomena of mentalism. It should not be necessary here to inform the student that which we call sound, light, heat, magnetism, electricity, the X-rays, and other forms of energy are but varying forms of vibration, and that even the most solid piece of material substance, a diamond or a piece of steel, for instance, is composed of a countless number of tiny atoms, which in turn are composed of minute electrons and particles, all in constant vibratory motion, manifesting intense energy, dashing about and circling around each other, bounding and rebounding from each other, each atom resembling a solar system with its circling planets in constant motion. The elementary textbooks on physical science inform their readers that everything and all things of which may have any knowledge through our senses are but appearances arising from differing rates of vibration, and that, moreover, our only consciousness of them is the result of vibration. But what of the law of rhythm, which causes everything to beat time, so to speak, as the aphorism states? Let us consider this law, for it has a very important bearing upon mental states and phenomena. Rhythm, according to the accepted usage, is movement in measured time, the most familiar instance of which is the time in music, which is measured by the beats of the metronome or the baton. And scientific investigation, as well as the ancient occult teachings, show us that everything in the cosmos beats time and moves in accordance with rhythm. We see this in the swing of the planets, the beating of the human heart, the inbreathing and outbreathing of the lungs, the rise and fall of the tides, and in the operation of vibration on every plane and everything. As vibration is universal, so rhythm is universal. A moment's thought will show you that all the phenomena in nature manifest this law of rhythmic movement between two extremes. There is always the ebb and the flow of things. Always the rhythmic swing of the pendulum between the two extremes of the thing. Day is succeeded by night, summer by winter, action by reaction, work by rest, activity by inactivity, intermittent symptoms in diseases, good times by bad times in business, exaltation by depression. On every plane may be observed instances of this universal pendulum swing of rhythm, which carries the thing to and from between its two polar extremes. As the aphorism says, everything moves to and fro in rhythm between its two poles. Everything rises and falls in rhythm within the limits of its nature. Everything advances and retreats in rhythm within the limits of its power. Modern science holds that the evolution of worlds must have had its precedent involution, and the evolution must be followed by devolution, and so on to infinity. It holds that just as the suns and planets were revolved by stages from the nebulae, so must they return to the nebulae in time, again to begin a new series of evolutionary world building. Notice the quotation from Huxley in the first part of this lesson. Herbert Spencer makes this law of rhythm one of the principles of his philosophy. The Arcane teaching also shows the law of rhythm to be operative in the form of the days and nights of the cosmos, the swing of rhythm between the manifest cosmos and the unmanifest cosmos. The law of polarity and the law of rhythm are twin laws. They are bound to each other for eternity. You will notice the resulting effect, that the rise and fall, or rhythmic pendulum swing, is determined, governed, and restrained by the length of the scale of polarity. Nothing can swing beyond the limits of its poles. Nothing can exceed the limits of its nature or power. Consequently, if a thing swings far in one direction, it swings back equally far in the other. If its swing is great, its extremes are widely apart. If the swing is small, then the extremes are close together. The pendulum illustration may be applied to the phenomena on all planes. A short beat of the metronome allows the rod to move only a short distance each way. The long beat admits of a wide swing. And so those who enjoy keenly also suffer keenly. While those whose natures allow of but limited suffering are also capable of only a limited degree of capacity for enjoyment. A pig suffers but little and enjoys but little, while a highly organized, sensitive, high-strung human being suffers the joys of heaven at times and also the pain of hell at others. The pendulum swings as far in one direction as in the other. Only by a mastery of mental rhythm can man hope to escape the pain that his high development would otherwise bring him. The Arcane teachers instruct their pupils in the art of mental transmutation, by an understanding of which they may apply the energy and power of mental vibrations intelligently, and under the control of the reason and the will. When it is understood that the difference between mental states is like the difference between the physical elements, merely a rate of vibration, then mental transmutation or mental alchemy becomes as real as the physical transmutation or physical alchemy of the ancients, which science is now on the eve of rediscovering. An understanding of this gives one the mastery of self, and also the secret of mentalism. Moreover, an understanding of the law of rhythm enables one to take advantage of the flood tide of mental rhythm. and a neutralizing or rising above the ebb tide. With an understanding of the law of balance, one may so balance and counterbalance himself that he is not disturbed by the backward swing of the pendulum of rhythm, but instead may take advantage of its energy and transmute it into desirable things. In this understanding comes the poise of power. Let us now consider the law of cyclicity, which is akin to the law of rhythm. Listen to the aphorism. Aphorism 23. Cyclicity is akin to rhythm, and arises by reason of it. All events tend to move in a cyclic trend, in constant circular movement of continuous recurrence. The only escape from cyclicity is found in the process of transmutation into spirality. This is accomplished by advancing the central point of motion. The conversion of the circle into the spiral is one of the highest forms of mental alchemy. The law of cyclicity manifests in the universal tendency of things to swing in circles. Cyclicity is an outgrowth or more complex form of rhythm. The primal manifestation of rhythm is action to and fro in a straight line or path, a movement backward and forward between the limits of the poles. This would be the invariable movement if the particular force manifested were the only manifestation of force or energy in that particular field of the cosmos. But when the swinging pendulum, free to move in any direction, is subjected to the conflicting attractions and repulsions of other manifestations of force and energy, then is manifested the universal tendency toward a circular trend. The tendency to convert the straight path of the swing into a circular path or cycle. The action and reaction, the attraction and repulsion, arising from the conflict between the force of the rhythmic swing in a straight line on the one hand, and the attractive and repellent forces from without, on the other hand, tend to swing the moving thing in a perfect circle around a central point of pivotal center. And these conflicting forces are in operation through the cosmos. And the manifestation of cyclicity may be noticed on all planes. There is ever the evidence of the cyclic trend of things and events, the tendency to move in circles. The electrons and the atoms move in circles, just as do the planets around the sun, and just as does the sun move around some other center in space. The highest occult teachings, as well as the highest speculations of science, inform us that there is always a movement in circles around some given point, and the movement of this center of motion around some other center, and so on to infinity. The aphorism states that all events tend to move in a cyclic trend, in constant circular movement of continuous recurrence. Now, and the experience of man, aided by the reports of history, bear out this statement. The student of human history is struck by the continuous cyclic trend manifested throughout the ages of history. The student of philosophy is attracted by the same evidence in his own field. And so it is with every field of human thought. Cyclic trend is noticeable everywhere. Races and nations rise, flourish, decline, and fall, only to be succeeded by others traveling over the same lines. Westward, the star of empire takes its flight. The center of political power constantly changing. The civilizations of Atlantis, Egypt, Chaldea, Rome, and Greece arose and passed away. Our civilization is but traveling over the same general lines. All forms of political government monarchic, autocratic, democratic, in all their variations, were known in the past as in the present. The same law is observable in the history of philosophical thought. Theories popular in Greece over 2,000 years ago afterward fell into disrepute, but are now again forcing their way to the front. The scientific theories of causation, continuity, determinism, and evolution were popular in ancient Greece over 2,000 years ago. They were likewise popular in ancient Egypt and India centuries before that time. Fashions in literature, dress, and manner constantly recur, traveling round and round in their little circles. Laugh as we may at the absurdity of fashion in dress, nevertheless, it proceeds according to cyclic law. Religious ideas are as old as the world. Pantheism, polytheism, monotheism, and atheism all have played their parts of fashions in religious thought over and over again, and will play them again. The present day revival in interest in occult thought arises from the same law. And the life of individuals manifests the same trend and tendency. A little thought will convince you that the majority of people travel in circles in life. The same old thing over and over again, recurring at intervals of greater or lesser duration according to the nature of the person. The majority of persons are like the squirrel in the cage who travels all day on his whirling wheel, but ends where he began. But, you may say, if the cosmos travels around in a continuous circle, it would never progress or advance into increased consciousness. How very true. And if the individual continued in the constant circular movement of continuous recurrence, he would never advance on the path. True. The aphorism gives us the secret when it says the only escape from cyclicity is found in the process of transmutation into spirality. This is accomplished by advancing the central point of motion. If the central point of motion of a circle is moved forward, then the circle is converted into a spiral. The central point is advanced in the cosmos by the cosmic will, urging forward the entire cosmic process, and thus converting the cyclic trend into a spiral trend, onward and upward, in advancing and rising circles toward progress. And by a similar process, the individual may convert the circle of his life motion into an advancing and rising spiral, which, while carrying him around the life circle, will at the same time raise him to a stage higher at each turn. While apparently traveling around in a circle like the average person, he will be a stage higher at each turn. The mountain of attainment, around which winds the spiral path, is traveled only in this way. Round and around the pilgrims travel, seemingly retracing the same steps, but in reality reaching a stage higher each circle they make. They often complain until they learn better, saying, "I've gone around and around and I still reach nowhere." But when they compare their present stage with that of a year ago, they see that they have advanced. Is this not the case with you, friend? Have you not used these very words? Heed the lesson. By advancing the central point by the will, the wise and strong convert the cycles into spirals and thus attain and advance. As the aphorism says, this is one of the highest forms of mental alchemy. That concludes Lesson 20. Our next lesson, Lesson 21, The Secret of Balance, is the third lesson in Part 7 of William Walker Atkinson's The Arcane Teaching, Part 7 being called Arcane Secrets. Lesson 21 also being the last lesson in the entire Arcane teaching. The secret of balance. So our next video will be the last in this series.